welcome to our bee meeting this month. Hopefully their bees are doing well. Just a couple of announcements. First off is we will have a beginning beekeepers class on the 4th of March. It's $70. It's from 8 to 4. And that also pays for your membership. So it's your membership. So with the $70 includes your membership, lunch, and a +1. So you can bring another person with you. So there's a lot of good information that'll be there. Unfortunately, I'll be traveling out of town, won't be there, but we have great beekeepers who will be running that. Next, membership's $20. Jen is in the back. Jen, raise your hand. She's taking payments for membership. It's $20. You can pay by Venmo or cash, and she'll take the cash. Let's see what else. Oh, how many people are interested in mini frames? Anybody interested in mini frames? Okay, come see me if you're interested in mini frames. You have to buy at least 56, and we're going to see if we can put an order together. But the minimum order per person is 56. And basically that'll be 2 mediums filled with mini frames.
How much per frame?
We don't, we're trying to figure that out once we know who's doing it and where the price breaks are at. Next, Cody Davis.
How many people are familiar with farm field days for elementary kids? 1.
Oh, I am sorry.
2.
Shelley is in the back too.
Okay, 3. Wow.
And I do it in their
And Janelle is too.
county.
We have a great opportunity for improvement here. So this spring, the Utah County Beekeepers Association is helping support what's called Farm Field Days. And it's 4 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We put on a little display for children in 2nd grade, I believe they're about 7. They come to Harwood Farms and they go to all different kinds of stations, goats, pigs, they learn about growing plants and whatnot. Anyway, we sponsor a bee booth there. And we're looking for some volunteers to show up. It's about 2 hours long or so. And they rotate these kids through there, and they're only there about maybe 5 or 6 minutes. And it is a lot of fun. It's kind of like a dumpster fire. You have the extinguisher. You teach them all about bees. They are horribly curious.
In
and
6 minutes.
In 6 minutes, right.
Or less.
And that's a good point. They do have a bunch of props available. They've got photographs and all kinds of things, you know, things like what's on a store shelf if you have bees, what isn't on a store shelf if we don't have bees. So it kind of instills a little bit of curiosity into them. That's what we're looking for. Anyway, second thing we're looking for, volunteers. So it's about an hour and a half or so long. There's a session in the morning, a session in the afternoon. Some of these are already blank.
Are you by yourself or is there one person?
If you want to team up with someone, that's great. I did it with my daughter last year. We had a blast.
What is it?
It is Tuesday the 28th and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday up to the 31st. And the first session is about 9:30 to 11:30-ish, a couple hours, and second is 11:30 to 1:30. March, yes, March is the month.
And I'll just put a plug in. It's a lot of fun. These kids are just, if you ask them, every one of them's raising their hand, trying to talk.
Yep.
And you can't even we have a little speech that we have there, but you can't even get through that because they just want to know about the bees.
They inundate you. And they're not teenagers yet, so they're still pretty cool. Sorry, we don't have any teenagers. Go ahead.
So I'm an elementary principal. So where is this?
Harwood Farms.
It's put on by the, Shelley, what group puts it on? Is it?
I'm sorry.
Farm Bureau.
The Farm Bureau puts it on.
So over there, we did Highland last year, the equestrian park, and they did a sheepdog demonstration with live sheep, and the kids were just eating that up. And John Deere brings some big tractors and some equipment out, and so it's kind of a big deal for the kids. They put a lot of effort into it. And Mr. Principal will get with you later. Okay, so we're going to send this around. Be very generous. Simon, we'll start with you. And I'll let you part of that.
And if you're hesitant, understood, but it is a lot of fun. And one person being there, you can talk. Just showing them honey and other things, they just get excited.
They do. Any
By
questions?
the time you get started, it's already
It's over, yeah. We were scrambling.
This is March.
March.
28th, 29th, 30th, and 31st.
Okay, thank you, Cody. Janelle and
Yes.
what's she up there?
Out of nowhere.
Shelley,
Yeah.
did you want to come up? Or you're in the middle of? And by the way, at the end of the meeting back there, we're going to have the membership signups, and we also have pollen patties. So if you need pollen patties, they're $3, right?
Yep, for those that
$3 each. So I'm going to turn the time over right now to Shelley and Janelle,
Yeah.
unless Shelley doesn't want to come up here. It doesn't look like she does. I think
She's
you're on
like,
your
no,
own.
I'm on my own.
So we're going to talk about BAB right now.
Yep. We just, yep, for those that don't know, the BAB is Be a Beekeeper. It's a youth program for those that are 12 to 18 or 12 to 18. We changed the age a few years ago, but 12 to 18, they can apply and write an essay, and then they're selected, and then the Utah County Beekeepers Association gives them bees and their boxes and stuff to get started. So we are just going to announce tonight. One of them is here. So we had 4 that were chosen this year. One is Preston, and I think he's here, right?
He's on his way.
Okay, he's on his way.
The address of the building.
Oh, I thought I gave it to him. So Preston, and he can come up at the end. Ashley and Ammon and Miles are going to be our 4 beekeepers. So a lot of the things that happen during the year, that goes to support the BAB program. So next year, you can tell family, friends, other people about it too, and they can do. So anything else?
The BAB?
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, the BAB. So just so you know, a lot of what we do, we put into the BAB program. So a lot of our budget is given to the BAB program. Because we feel it's essential for kids to learn how to be beekeepers. So us old people can retire and the youth can take over beekeeping. Okay, so tonight's meeting, we want to welcome Stan Moulton for coming and talking to us tonight about queens. And do you want me to hand those
Yeah,
out?
maybe a few more people came in.
Yeah, I think a few more people. If you didn't get this little handout, you can come
Ready
up.
for me now?
It's your turn.
Okay, my turn.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty serious. I thought some people might laugh at that, but I guess not. Okay, thanks for inviting me to speak to you tonight. We've got on the list of subjects tonight is queen bees, and we want to talk a little bit about how it is to identify the easiest ways to identify if your colony is queen right. So. So if I could get, maybe just help me, it'll help me as we go, if I know the experience level of some of the beekeepers. Some of you I do, some of you I know are just beginning, and I know some of you have been at it for quite a while, but who's never kept bees before that's here tonight? Okay, four or five of you. Some of you I know have, because I recognize you as some of our customers that bought bees from us before. Excuse me. Yep.
Sorry.
No problem.
I didn't like the folding chairs.
All right, so let's start. Did everybody get one of these little handouts? We'll loosely or roughly follow this as we go. Can everybody hear me okay? So we're going to ask, so as part of my business, my wife particularly and myself, we've been working really hard on putting together some bee lessons. So we have lots of questions about bees, and we found that it's not always convenient for somebody to show up to the bee club meeting or the bee class when it's scheduled. And so we've been making videos for quite a few years. We've finally got them together in some organized lessons. So if you go to our website, that's thehoneycompany.com, you'll find lessons there. Lots of it. I think we've got over 300 videos in the last dozen years that we've been putting together. So if you are inclined, we've got one of the lessons on there is free. It's beginning beekeeping course. You'll find pretty much what you need to be successful at beekeeping. And then if you'd like a little deeper dive into beekeeping all the way up to queen rearing, there's lessons on there too. So if you'd like to sign up for those, we've also got, just coming out now, we've got 52 emails that are going to be sent out, one each week this year, and they'll be on a seasonal topic. So it may not coincide with your particular area right where you are, right when you need it, but we've made those so that it'll give you the heads up, a notification on what you need to be doing at that time of year, roughly in your beehive, if you'd like those. So sign up for those on the website if you're inclined to. And all right, let's talk. Let me ask you a few more questions. So, so the bees were flying in Utah County anyway, along the Wasatch Front. I think the bees were flying yesterday. Is that right? Was it warm enough?
Yeah.
They warmed up to what, 42 degrees or something like that? So you said yes, your bees were flying. They're alive then. Wonderful.
Some of them are, at least 5.
All right, so probably wasn't any robbing going on yet, so they're probably your bees coming and going out of your hive?
I think so.
Okay, so did anybody see any pollen come in yesterday?
Didn't look that closely.
So 2015, I remember the earliest that I remember recording in my bee journals, we had, this was in Provo, we had pollen coming in on February the 3rd. And usually I mark on my calendar Valentine's Day is about the first time that we see pollen coming in on the Wasatch Front. So
Beekeeper in Hurricane reported white pollens today.
okay,
That's Hurricane.
Hurricane, right. So that's a lot warmer than up here, especially this year. I'm actually quite excited this year about keeping bees. We've got a potential really good honey crop coming this year. So why would I say that?
Because of all the water.
We got a ton of snow up there, so if it doesn't flood our hives out and wash them away, I've got a couple of yards. I was just kind of kidding there, but I got a couple of yards that might be in the floodplain. So 1 yard I can't even get into. It gets stuck. Anyway, should have a good honey crop. So I think maybe before we get into queens too, maybe just say a few things about preparing for a good honey crop this year. So typically, when we used to sell beekeeping equipment, we would sell a kit, and that would come with the lid, the bottom board, and 3 deep hive bodies. And that was about sufficient for this location. It's got to be a better than average year for your bees to fill up 4 deep boxes full. So typically we would sell 3 boxes. So this year I've been inclined to recommend having more boxes ready on hand if we get a really good honey flow. So with the amount of snow and the amount of flowers that we're going to have, so for the beginning beekeepers, let me simplify the logic here. So if we have rain or snow, then we get flowers. If we get flowers, we get nectar. If we get nectar, we get honey. If we get honey, then we get bees. If we get bees, we get pollination. If we get pollination, then we get crops. If we got crops, then we get to eat. So this year, with all the snow we got, we're planning on a lot of good healthy bees. So we'll have the potential then to fill up that third deep box as surplus for the beekeeper, and maybe even more than that. So what that means is, if you're ordering beekeeping equipment, if you don't want to let the bees get ahead of you. So if the bees get ahead of you, you can lose a crop pretty fast. So you want to be prepared with your equipment for a good honey year. All right. So, okay, back to pollen. So I was asking you about pollen. So next week it'll be interested. It's kind of cold. I don't know what the forecast is for next week, but if it warms up to, so typically the bees may not fly much till it gets up into the 50s. So, but if it's a thaw in January, we didn't get much of one in January, but there was a few days maybe that they flew. So as soon as it'll warm up though, enough for those bees to break up their cluster a little bit, they're going to want to come out. They've been cooped up in there, they got cabin fever pretty bad and they need a potty break, they're going to come out. And so they'll do that if it gets into the 40s, they'll come out if it's urgent. Yes?
Will they recluster after they've gone out for their cleansing flight?
Yeah, they
It's
will.
cold.
Yes, yeah, they will. So they'll come out, and then when it warms up in the mid-afternoon, they'll come out and fly around real quick, and then they'll go back in and snuggle back together and eat some more honey for a while. So pollen is one of the things that is an indicator that your bees are queen right. So if you have pollen, let's say it warms up, let's say the winter follows the averages here, and about Valentine's Day here sometime next week it warms up enough, and they're doing more than just breaking up a cluster and coming out for a cleansing flight. They're actually going to go out and forage a little bit. They're going to look for, first off, they're going to want pollen. So what they want to do is raise brood with it. So if you were to look at your colony next week and you saw pollen coming in, you might guess that you got a good queen in there. There's one indicator that'll tell us that we're queen right. So without even opening the box, without doing much other than just a quick glance on the landing board early in the season, or well, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, if you've got lots of pollen coming in, then they're probably raising brood. So they need that pollen. So that pollen coming in early on is kind of the green light. That's the go button for brood raising. So as soon as pollen starts coming in, you're going to anticipate that you'll have a bunch of brood being reared. Yes, ma'am?
Is that mainly just this time of year, or is that throughout the year?
Yeah, so all year, so let's say, what we're talking about tonight is how to diagnose whenever you need to if you're queen right. So if you're seeing a lot of foraging bees that are bringing in a lot of pollen, then you can probably guess that you got a good queen in there. So that's a guess, or we won't know for sure unless we get in there and snoop around a little, but that's one indication that your bees are doing well. So pollen is the bee food, right? That's the baby formula. They've got to have the amino acids in pollen for the proteins to build the bodies of your brood. Yeah.
What about the stored pollen they put in the, during the year that they?
Yeah. So they'll store pollen, right? And so right now, if you were to look in a hive, did anybody take the opportunity to look in their hive in the last, okay, which is probably a good thing, but sometimes you get away with it, it warms up enough. So you may see some pollen, you should see some pollen in there that was stored from last year, right? And they'll begin using that. So they should be raising brood right now. They wouldn't be able to raise brood if they didn't have some stores from the previous year. So this time of year, though, they'll start, as soon as the daylight starts to increase, then they'll start to raise brood. So some of that's dependent on the variety of bees you're keeping. So the Italian variety of bees is known to raise brood, at least even in a little patch. Sometimes they don't completely shut down. So other varieties of bees will shut down for the winter, usually in the fall. But by now they should be brooding up. So they'll be using pollen that's already in the hive, and they'll be anxious to get some fresh stuff too as soon as they possibly can. So let me back up just a little bit. So because I know we got 5 beekeepers here that haven't kept bees before. So when we talk about pollen, somebody explain to the new beekeepers here, how do you know if bees are bringing in pollen?
Their legs.
Okay. Yeah. So they got their pollen baskets, and they'll be bringing it in. So this time of year, I would anticipate seeing the first pollen that's going to come in is going to be kind of a pale yellow or just an off-white. It'll be a lighter color. So one of the first things that I've noticed that they're bringing pollen in from would be from maples. So the silver maple is going to produce pollen sooner than Norway maple or some of the other ones. So if you're familiar with what a silver maple tree is, who has one in their yard or their neighborhood? Yeah. Okay. So have you observed the bees on your silver maple? Are there any buds on it yet? It's been a little bit too cold. I imagine it's going to be another week or two. Yeah. Are you on the Wasatch Front? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, it's useful as a beekeeper to acquaint yourself with the flowers, the plants, the trees that your bees are going to be foraging on. It'll help you guess, take a good guess on what time of year. Speaking of being prepared for a honey crop, if you know you've got linden trees in your neighborhood, you're going to know the time of year when those come on. You're going to recognize the smell of the linden trees when they come on, and you're going to be prepared with a super to put that on there to get some of the best honey that there is. That's one of the gourmet's varietal honeys that people really seek after. So we've got some other nectar sources for queen bees and pollen sources that'll be coming up first. So some of the first things that come on are going to be our trees. So we've got maples, and we've got elms. They're going to produce some pollen.
Pines?
Pine trees, so the pines, they'll get some pollen off of that, but I think that's coming, I'm not sure what time the spruce or those pines are going to be producing any pollen. But there's not a lot. So we've got willows. If you've got willows in your neighborhood, those are some of the earliest blooms that come on. The bees will be foraging on those. Not getting a lot of nectar from them, but they're getting a lot of pollen. We've got, let's see, I mentioned elms. We've got box elder. Those are going to have those catkins on it that show up early. We've got cottonwood trees. They're going to have some pollen on them. The bees will be all over those trees. Those are some of the first things coming in. All right, so what does that have to do with queen bees? All right, so we just mentioned that pollen is the go button for brood rearing. They've got the amino acids that they need to mix up the baby formula, but they also need some sugar to go with it. So this time of year is a critical time that we need to, if we've got a good queen, and she starts raising brood right now, they'll get off to a good start. This time of the year is when you need to watch really carefully how much honey they've got in there. So once they start raising brood, now they're going to start consuming honey very quickly. So you lose more bees. If you lose bees in the wintertime, you're going to lose more in February and March than you are in December and January. So they don't need a whole lot of honey when it's real cold. They're in a tight cluster. They're not actively making, they're not drawing out comb. They're just in there snuggled together eating honey for the winter. And so as soon as they start to raise that brood though, when the pollen comes in, now we've got to watch the honey stores. So the thing to do is the next warm day, and you notice pollen coming in, and you need to go out and lift your beehive up. Take it up and see how much it weighs. So if you have a reference now, if you've got kind of a memory, if your back has a little muscle memory from last fall about how heavy it was, then you can take a guess on whether they're running out or how fast they're running out. So it'd actually be a good idea to go out now, before brood rearing has started in earnest, and lift your hive up and see how heavy it is. So you don't have to lift the whole thing up, right, but at least pick up the back. You can leave the corner of it on the ground, pick it up and get an idea. So get the snow and ice off of it, right, and the brick you put on top, right, so you know what just the hive weighs, right, and make sure it's not frozen down to the hive stand, right, so break it loose and lift it, see how heavy it is. And then go back here in a couple more weeks once they start raising brood, and lift it again, see if you think it's getting a little. I mean, you can put it on a scale if you want, that wouldn't be a bad thing to do, but just get a general idea of how much your hive weighs, and then compare it here in a couple more weeks, and then do it again in another week. So that'd be a good question for whoever's conducting next week to ask. Does your hive weigh less? Does your hive weigh more or less, or the same a month from now? Anyway, just curious to see that. So, all right, so if it weighs a lot less, now we know they're consuming a lot of their winter stored honey to raise brood with, because the pollen's coming in. So now you got to decide if you're going to need to feed your bees or not. If you're going to need to get in there and give them some sugar syrup. So if you have plenty of honey from last fall, you do not need to worry about it. If they lighten up considerably by mid-March, and it's forecasted we've still got snowy, cold weather, you maybe want to think about feeding. Okay. So, all right, pollen is an indicator that we're queen right. Okay, let's go down the list. We may not follow this exactly, but we'll give some other tips on what it means to. All right, let's talk about. Let's see. Let's talk about the queen's pheromones. Let's see. Before we get in the hive, let's see what other indicators before we even pop the lid on the hive. What other indicators can we gather before we even take our hive tool to the lid that tells us the status of the queen? So if same subject then. So let's say you go out. And test the weight on your hive, and then you go do it again a month from now, and they're gaining weight. We've had a few good days. Let's say we get some good days towards the end of March, month and a half from now, and they're picking up weight. As soon as the flowers are out, as soon as dandelions hit, they pick up weight really quickly. So just by lifting the hive will be another indicator for you whether you're queen right. So if the queen in there didn't make it through the winter, maybe you still have a few bees that survived, and they're just kind of milling around. They're not going to be increasing. You won't have new foragers out on the job to pick up any pollen or any nectar or to raise brood with, and the hive will start to lose weight. Even if they had plenty of honey to survive on, they won't be gaining. So there's another indicator before you even get in the hive whether you're queen right. Are they picking up speed? Are they gaining weight? Okay. Let's see. All right. Suppose we've gathered what we can by observing what's going on outside the hive, and we want to know further what our queen's doing. Let's take the lid off and look in there. So what would I expect to find if I have a colony that has a good queen in there, she's doing her job, and I just popped the lid. I just popped the lid off without taking any frames out. I haven't looked at any comb yet. I haven't looked for any brood yet. what would I expect to see if I just pop the lid off and the colony's queen right?
Bees.
A lot of bees.
See a lot of bees, first of all, so you look between the frames. And then and the behavior of those bees.
Number of frames you see bees on, even from the top.
Right, so you can count, just look down in between them, or right on the top bars, and you can count the numbers of frames that have bees on them. So if there's quite a few bees, if it's full, you may see a lot of bees coming and going from the entrance, but you won't really know how many bees in there until we've actually looked inside. So if we're seeing a lot of bees in there, we're guessing that the hive's got a queen because it's increasing. And then the next time you look in there, if there's more frames covered with bees, so we'll know, we can pretty much guess that we've got a queen that's doing her job. All right, what would the temperament, well, so we see a lot of bees, and what would their temperament if we saw, yeah,
Pretty calm, yeah.
yeah, they would. So typically, so some of this is all depends on whether you got your successfully started your bee smoker or not, and some of it depends on some of it depends on what time of day it is, right? So you know that the bee's temperament fluctuates, and so but on a typical day, if you get in there at the right time of day, and you should find the bees busy at work. If they've got a queen in there, they're not going to be so much concerned with you as they are with carrying on the hive activities. So they'll be busy coming and going. They'll be drawing out comb. They'll be drying out honey. They'll be conducting the hive activities.
Tending to brood.
They'll be tending brood. You'll see them feeding brood. So so I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but we had some really calm bees that I caught quite a few queens in the process of laying eggs, which is something I've really never seen much of before. So if you're careful about how you get in the hive and not disturb them too much, don't give them too much smoke and don't rattle things around too much when you get in there, occasionally you'll catch the queen in the process of laying eggs. And so you should find the bees that are busy at work. They'll be drawing comb, they'll be just doing what they're supposed to. So we haven't even found the queen yet. We haven't really looked at any combs yet. So there's another indicator that our bees are queen right. All right.
The calling will sound a little different too.
Okay.
Right.
Good. So so before, yeah, so there's a happy little hum that's going on in the hive if you listen. Some of this you can hear even before you get in the hive too. Yeah, you'll hear what the bees are doing. So there's always a bee or two that gets a little disturbed with you when you get in the hive that's got that angry buzz to it. But other than that, usually you can hear. You get, and I don't know best how to describe it. It's calm and busy, and it's just kind of like the traffic on a busy road, I guess, going to and from work. It's busy. It's got a busy hum to it instead of a disorganized, angry buzz to it. So you'll notice it after you've been in a hive for long enough. So, all right. Okay. So so part of this calm. So mentioning the pheromone. So okay. So why is that? So the queen gives out pheromones. So the hive knows that the queen's in there based on her pheromones that get passed around in the hive. So when the queen's present, those pheromones have a calming effect on the bees. Keeps them organized. Keeps their mind on work. So some of that's based on pheromones. All right. So far so good. So if these things aren't obvious to you, and you're still not sure if we've got a queen in a colony, let's take a frame out and look at it. All right. So let's pretend we're taking a frame out, and the queen's not on. So we still haven't found the queen ourselves. What would we expect to find? Let's assume that let's go right for the middle of the hive, right? Okay, we want to be careful if we do that and take a frame right out of the middle because the queen could be on it. We don't want to smash her, but we're going to go right for the brood and look at the brood and see what the brood pattern looks like. So we look down the frames, and we see the cluster, there's we see frames that have a lot of bees on them. We would guess, if you look down at the frames and you could see there's more bees on several frames in a row, the queen, that's where the brood's going to be. So there's another indicator. We know that there's brood if there's bees that are organized. Instead of just a few of them scattered over all the frames, there's more of them in the center as we look down there. We're guessing that's the brood chamber and that there's brood in it. So we're going to take a frame of brood out. So this time of year, if we got in there, let's say it warmed up to 50-something here in a couple of weeks, and you were just too curious you just couldn't stand it. You wanted to pop the lid on there and look in there and see what your bees are doing. So I'm not going to tell you not to do that. So part of the reason why we keep bees is for fun, right? So if we were...
And to be curious.
You're curious. You want to look in the hive just for fun and see what the bees are doing, okay, go right ahead. So in fact, I'm gonna encourage you to do it. So if it warms up enough, all right, so now everybody, I know some people are thinking, wait a minute, we're going to kill the brood, we're going to chill them. Don't chill your brood. So depends on how long you're in there and how warm it is. So if it gets up into the 50s, I wouldn't be afraid to go pop the lid on your beehive and look in there and see what's going on. So if the bees, let's say you've got two boxes high, and there's possibility that they could still be down below in the bottom box. Chances are they would be up in the top box near the lid where the honey is. So heat rises, right? And that's why they store the honey up underneath the lid in the top box, is so that they can stay warm and eat honey when the weather's this cold. So they'll probably be in the top box, and you could get in there briefly and have a quick look. So how else would we know how else do we know what the bees are doing this time of year if we never look in the hive this time of year? So there's a time when you just should not just stay out of the beehive in the middle of winter, right? But if it warms up enough, don't be afraid to. So let me say this too, while I'd encourage you to do that. If your bees find themselves a victim of spring dwindling and don't make it through till April, and you are really careful, if you were careful about how you popped the lid and looked in there at the end of February, your bees didn't die because you popped the lid in February, right? There's a few things that you could do wrong, but it would be useful to you to see what's going on with your queen, see what a patch of brood is in there. So typically, if you've got Italian bees or you've got a cross somewhere in between, they should have, I would guess, a lot of them will have just a little small piece of in one or two combs of brood right now. So it'll be interesting to see if you do that. If you look in there and see what's going on. So if you look in the frames with brood and you see a good pattern, you see a nice tight little small pattern of brood, we can guess we've got a good queen. This time of year that would be about right for her. So now do we need to look further? Should we keep going? Let's suppose we got that far. Are we satisfied? So it's only 55 degrees out there today, and I was curious to know if those, so you're going to order packages if you don't have a good queen and they dwindle down, so you're thinking, wait a minute, a couple years ago I was too late to get packaged bees and I didn't catch any swarms, so I want to know now what my queen's doing so I can make sure that I want a bucket of honey this year, and it's going to be a good honey year. I want bees, so I got to know what my queen's doing, and I might want to order more, but I won't know until I know if I got a really good colony coming up. I want to split them, but if the queen's dwindling and they're just falling apart, then I need to know. So there's another reason why it might be helpful to you to know what the queen's doing this time of year. So, all right, does anybody out there feel like I've given you bad advice by telling you to look in your beehive when the weather warms up enough?
So if you think that your queen is failing, there's really nothing you can do at this time anyway, right? Like, I mean, other than planning on purchasing a queen or a package and
right. So the earliest you could get queens would be out of Hawaii. You could get a queen from Hawaii this time of year, but I don't think they'd ship it here. It's too cold. If they shipped it here, she probably wouldn't make it. So yes, correct. So there's not really much you can do about it anyway, other than,
But at least you'll have the information. You'll
right,
know
you'll have
what-
information that you need to know if you're gonna try again this year. So, all right. So let me just say this. This is the toughest B class I've ever taught. What's the matter with you guys? Give me some questions, 'cause I've usually been interrupted by, 30 times by now. I'm very interruptible. Go ahead, shoot some questions.
We thought you had all the answers, so we're waiting to see what you had to say.
So maybe B clubs are, I guess everybody's bored. They know all this stuff already. So we can move on to, they wanted me to talk about queens and how to identify if you're queen right. But if it doesn't suit what you want to know right now, well, let's just move on. Yeah,
So you may have a queen right now,
yeah,
but if she's a 3-year-old queen, let's say, going into
Okay.
the summer,
yeah,
she may not last the summer.
yeah.
So what is your recommendation on, she's queen right now, but
Yeah.
what about in May?
Let's say she's a 2-year-old queen.
Yeah, 2-year-old.
So those first year, they're going into winter just full of bees and looking beautiful from that package you got, a new queen in there. And those, very typical, those really strong, beautiful colonies heading into winter do great. And they'll come out of winter doing great. And then as soon as the go button gets hit on brood, she says, all right, I'm ready to roll for another year, and maybe not. I think I overdid it last year. I'm out, and they just take a dive. So that can happen too. So I'd really watch for that. So excellent question.
I've got 2 hives that are,
Yeah.
this is their 2nd year, one that this is their 3rd year.
Yeah.
This is the 3rd year.
Okay, that's wonderful.
So I'm curious.
But how do you know that that's your original queen? It could be
Yeah.
a
Well,
queen that they
Yeah.
raised.
Unless you marked it.
Get marked up.
Yeah.
She's a marked queen, and she's,
Yeah.
Are you watching the queen cuts?
So if you mark them, you'll know if they're superseded or if you clip their wings. I started clipping some queen's wings this last year for the first time. Yes.
So if she's kind of going downhill,
Yeah.
won't the hive automatically start making a queen cell and?
They should. So okay, both of those questions are great. So there's a lot connected with both of those. So if you requeen every year, you've always got a new queen in there. How do we know if our bees have any longevity? And I'm not just talking about longevity of queen bees, but also the worker bees. So we want bees that'll live a long time. So even if it's just a gain of a few more foraging days before they quit, we've got quite an advantage considering how long it takes to get a bee up to speed and running before they're really contributing to the hive. And so we want to keep those queens for 3 years. That's a good thing if you've got a queen that's 3 years old. I think the oldest queen that I've ever had was 4 years. And I marked her. I used some good marking paint. If you really want to know. So sometimes those marking pens, you put on there, they don't last that long. It'll wear off, or the other attendants will chew it off. I don't know. It sometimes disappears. So if you get some good model paint, I like to use a little model paint. It takes a little longer to dry. It's a little more hard to apply onto a queen bee if you're into marking your own queens. That'll stay on there for quite a while. So the oldest bee that I had was 4 years, and that colony had chalk brood like crazy for forever. It never went away. So
in
go.
her 4th year, they had chocolate
Yep, they always had chalk brood. They were always kicking out monkeys.
from the beginning or just towards the end?
Yeah, as far as I can remember. I had her for 4 years, but the last couple of years. Yeah, she was just a great queen, kept laying eggs, and a lot of the brood got wasted because the chalk brood killed it, but she just kept right on going. Wonderful queen. Never saw any, they didn't have a mite problem, they didn't have any foul brood problems. So that's a whole other subject though, but I think chalk brood kind of chases out the other brood diseases. I'm just speculating there. So anyway. Okay, so if we have a 2-year-old queen, a 3-year-old queen, and she's really doing great, we really want to keep an eye on her. So sometimes they'll they'll perform, they'll start off the next year looking really good, and you think, wow, I'm gonna make a split out of this one. And April 1st, you're thinking, okay, before they swarm, I'm gonna split this colony up, and then you get around, you come back a few weeks later, and they're dwindling down, and you don't have enough bees in there to make a nuke out of them. You've had that happen. Anybody else have that happen? So, right. So what we want to do then is keep a close eye on those two-year-old queens, and make sure that they're continuing to progress. So sometimes
Explain what you're looking for there.
explain what we're, okay. Right, so we're looking for, here's how it would go along the Wasatch Front. Let's say they really start raising brood in March, and we've got a spring weather that's cooperating, and we've got dandelions coming out. We've got the fruit trees going crazy by middle of April. They've got plenty of nectar coming in that they're going to start thinking about swarming. Right. So if you overwintered them in let's say two deep boxes, and by middle of April they're getting full. So they've consumed most of the honey in there over the winter, and so now they're starting to fill back up again, the frames to the side of the box, and they've got 4, 5, 6, 7 frames of brood in there by the middle of April. Yeah. So, and then you come back about the 1st of May, and they've got less. They're starting to dwindle down. So they were picking up speed rapidly, and then I come back 2-3 weeks later, and now I'm seeing,
But they haven't
3.
swarmed.
Yeah. So we're assuming they haven't swarmed, right? So there's not swarm cells in there. We'll talk more about swarm cells in a sec, but we're assuming that half the hive didn't take off on you. Then we're starting to get worried. Okay, now our 3-year-old queen or our 2-year-old queens starting to fizzle out. So that's the time that we need to get a new queen in there, raise a new queen, take the old queen out so they'll make an emergency queen. All right, so how do we tell if they swarm? So thanks for the next one. So assume they're starting, assume we get in there. Did I answer that
Yeah.
close enough?
And if they swarm, the old queen goes away and there's a new queen forming in the box.
Yeah, so you've seen queen cells before, right? So you could probably tell the difference between swarm cells and a supersedure cell.
Swarm cells are on the bottom.
Usually, yep, and a lot more of them. If they're just superseding, which would probably take place later in the season, in summer, there would probably just be 1, 2, maybe 3.
But up in the frame
Yep,
more.
right on the comb, the middle of the comb somewhere. Right, so if we got in there at the end of April and we saw a bunch of swarm cells, or we saw remnants of swarm cells, and so our bees have dwindled, we think, well, what happened to our bees? Is my queen failing, or did they swarm? We're gonna look for swarm cells, right? So then we'll know if we lost our bees, or if they're just dwindling down. So another way you can tell if your queen's just losing speed, we're not seeing any swarm cells, but we're seeing a brood pattern that's starting to fail. So if you're new at beekeeping, it's going to take a little bit of experience before you're able to identify a spotty brood pattern. Sometimes it's kind of in between. You don't know. Quite often you look at a frame and you'll think, how's this queen doing? Well, the brood pattern in there, it's not real bad, but it's not real good either. It's kind of spotty, but is it bad enough that I should take that queen out and get a new one? So we see the best brood patterns first thing in the springtime. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So do you recommend, to alleviate a lot of that guesswork, just requeening every year?
So no, I don't. Well, let me qualify. Let me say what you're a commercial beekeeper, and you've got to have those new queens because you're counting on that pollination contract, or you're out of business. Then I would say this to a commercial beekeeper. I would say you'd probably be best off if you have new queens in there every year. However, do your part, please, with the rest of us hobbyists and some of the other ones, and set aside a few colonies, the amount that you could stand to use, and just let those queens go. And test them for mite resistance, and test them for longevity, and improve your breeding stock so that all of us can benefit from it, not just taking from those in the industry who are making the effort to solve some of the problems. So you'd be better off having a new queen. They're always the most productive. They're always the least likely to swarm. They're more gentle. Sometimes those 2-year-old queens, they just get a little mean. I don't know. I don't know what it is about the queen that's their second
Well,
year.
you have the bunch of babies, and you see how you feel. You have like hundreds of thousands of babies, and see how you feel about it. You'd be cranky.
So you'd be more cranky after you've got the second year.
Yeah, hello.
The more babies you get, the more grumpy.
crankier you get.
All right.
Yes, I don't know.
So that first year queen's real nice, and then later on she gets a disposition. So I'm not sure why that is, but it seems it's.
She's tired.
I think she's tired. It's verifiable. But sometimes those second year queens, they're more established. They've been there a while, and anyway, for a number of reasons. So there's another reason why you might want to requeen every year. They're just gentler bees. Okay. So, all right. Okay, sometimes I lose my track of where I was last when we get a question, but don't let that stop you. Ask me another question. Yeah.
How do you manage your bees in the springtime for that April slot we just talked about? So the bees are big, they're growing, the queen's good, we're assuming she's going to go in. What are you doing to manage your hive? So do you knock them back to a certain size, take a split off of them to get them so they're going to be that just right size when your honey flow starts, your nectar flow?
Right. So what problem I would love to have is have so many bees that came through the winter that were strong enough, and on a year like this when I know we're going to get a good honey crop, I would just make sure they've got plenty of space early enough. Don't wait to put your super on until the other one's full. So there's a lot of occasions when we'll watch the frames and we'll wait until 8 of the frames are full and they're just starting to work on number 9 and 10 frame in that box before we put another super on. So I would get one on before they're filling up. So I'd love to have.
What average date? Like, would you say if you could pick a date of the year, like what are you shooting for?
All right. So some of the biggest nectar flows we're going to get early.
I asked what date, what time of year.
What time of year? Right. So dandelions, yeah.
Will you just repeat his question?
Yes. Sorry. So the question is how would I manage my bees so that early in the spring, so that I wouldn't lose the queen, wouldn't lose swarms, and I wouldn't lose a honey crop. So I would keep up with the bees. So we're talking about the question is how do you not let your bees get ahead of you? Right? We don't want them flying away. We don't want them running out of room. So if we've got a good queen in there and everything's going well, about the time. So let me give you the time of year based on the flowers that are out rather than a calendar day, right? So we're gonna look for dandelions. Dandelions are one of the first things that come on, and when dandelions are on, we get a lot of pollen coming in, and we're starting to get some good nectar in. So some of the first early trees that we mentioned earlier, they're going to bring a lot of pollen in from that, but not necessarily a lot of nectar. And what nectar they do, they're going to use up pretty quick right away. So when we start seeing fruit trees blooming, we're going to get a lot of nectar off of that.
When everything starts to blow.
Yep, when everything pops. You'll see it about the first week in April, depending on the year, but Wasatch Front typically. But when the fruit trees are blooming, we got dandelions on, and we got the warm weather. So that doesn't mean anything if you don't have warm weather for the bees to go out and forage and get it. So when the weather warms up, that's probably too late to put a super on. So watch the weather forecast and take your best guess on when the fruit trees are going to open up and when the dandelions are coming out. and get your super on there a week before that. Just don't worry too much about chilling the bees down, right? If we put too many boxes on all at once, then they're not going to be able to expand their brood chamber as quickly because they just lost some heat. I wouldn't worry so much about that. I'd go ahead and put that box on. You want to stay ahead of your nectar flow. Don't let your bees get ahead of you. So that will do that'll do a couple of things. So by doing that, we're going to give them enough space so that nectar doesn't end up in the brood chamber. So if nectar ends up in where the queen wants to lay eggs, that's going to trigger swarming. So now they're going to think, well, we're too crowded, there's no place for the queen to lay eggs, we're going to start swarm cells. So if you have a super on before that, then that gives them a place to put their honey before they decide that they're going to reproduce, they're going to move, they're going to divide, right? So it's important not only to get a super on early enough, but also make sure that they've got some space in the brood chamber. So you think if you just throw another super on there, well, it might solve the swarming impulse, might keep them in their box a little longer, but they may not. They still may backfill the brood chamber. If you could get in the brood chamber and you can put a couple of empty drawn combs in the brood chamber, then you're going to be able to hold off swarming a little bit longer. So that's a management technique. That's something that I would do when the blossoms really come out. Okay, yeah.
You said put 2 empty frames, but they have to be drawn comb.
They wouldn't have to be. So if you want to get drawn comb out quick, the bees will do it. If you give them space in the brood chamber, they'll draw it out lickety split.
Put it in the middle, so separate
Yeah.
the brood.
Yeah. So there's some cautions with that too. Let me come back to that one in just a second.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was my question.
Okay.
I mean, because when you pull out a frame and it's got wax moth, so can you add the empty, just.
Oh. So yeah, so if you've stored some boxes over the winter and you find wax moth in one of your frames, if it's not really bad, yeah, I'd put it in there. They'll clean it up. So you can have that wax moth matting over there that's just destroyed everything. Then you'd want to clean it off, help them clean it, scrape it down to the foundation if it's wax foundation, or if it's plastic foundation, you could help them clean it up. If it's just a little bit of wax moth, I wouldn't worry about it. Clean it off a little bit and throw it in there. There's not any diseases from the wax moth that are going to cause a problem. Might look terribly messy and you think, oh man, I don't want to put that back in a hive. But if it's not real bad, they'll clean it up. They'll sort it out. So that's how nature works, right? So the bees, if the bees' nest is too old and dirty, they might swarm, they might abscond, they might leave. Then the wax moth comes in and chews it all up down to nothing. And then the bees can come back the next year and move in again and start over. So wax moth doesn't
like
really...
forest fire.
Yeah, it's kind of like a forest fire. It just cleans things up and then we can start some new growth. So wax moth's not necessarily a reason for you to throw your frame out. I'm just saying if it's not real bad, right? You can clean it up, put it back in. It won't hurt the bees any. Give them something to do. Okay, let's see. I got off track again, did I? On wax moth. So I was told I had 30 minutes to talk. Is that true? I've already gone way over that.
Yeah.
It probably didn't start till like 10 after.
Okay.
Well, is there any other questions? We don't want to keep everybody.
Yeah, go ahead.
Stan, I was going to say a management procedure is generally when you talk supers, we want to keep that as honey.
Yeah.
And so a standard procedure is typically they'll be in that they'll be in that top box.
Yeah.
Just switch them. And that's one management technique that works pretty good, so you don't get the brood into your super frames.
Yes, that'll slow them down too. So if they want to
put
put
the second
honey.
box to the first box?
Yeah, so just
Bottom?
just swap your boxes, right? So you have to be careful when you do that. So if you've got it can't most of the time that's a good idea. Most of the time that'll work just fine. So bees don't like honey though down on the bottom board. They don't want it in the bottom box. They want it in the upper box. And so when you swap boxes like that, the bees are going to naturally want to go down there and uncap that honey.
Clean out the honey.
And clean out the honey, and then have brood in the bottom box and honey in the top box. So that gives them, it's a distraction for them. It's a little bit of work for them. And,
Make them mad?
but I don't think it'll make them mad. It'll just give them another task, but it'll slow down swarming and buy you some time if you want to do that. Yeah.
But if you you have to be careful so you're not splitting your
Yeah.
brood.
Right. So let's
If they're all in one box, you're okay.
Yeah, so let's come back to this question. So let's say we only had we only had 3 or 4 frames of bees. They just barely made it through winter. They're just barely hanging on. So I wouldn't at that point early in the spring when it's still cold at night. So when I mean at nighttime cold, it's cold enough for them to cluster. And they don't have a lot. You don't want to get in there and make a division in between their brood chamber. You want to keep them all together because they need to keep the heat in the brood chamber consistent. And if you spread them out too much with a really small cluster of bees, then you can actually do some damage. So then the brood on the outsides of that might get chilled because they're going to want to cluster one side or the other, so you might lose some brood doing that. So if you've only got 2, 3, 4 frames of bees in there getting through the winter, then that's not a good idea until it warms up a little bit. Now, if you're getting through the winter in great shape, you know, you've got 2 boxes full of bees just ready to roll, I wouldn't be afraid to do that. Just go right ahead and make some space right in the middle of the brood chamber, give them some empties. That'll keep them from swarming at least a little longer. Put a super on and give them space in the brood chamber is a good idea. So usually, yeah.
I'm curious about the splitting. So
yeah,
I'm one of those super new guys. When it comes time to split a hive, do you need 2 queens in order to split?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So each box will have their own queen. So it doesn't mean you need to order one. They'll make one. If you wanted to split a hive and let them make their own, you could do that. There's lots of different ways to requeen them. So you could purchase a mated queen from someplace, and we'll have some of those. You can give them a queen cell. So there's a whole lot of different ways that you can get them queen right. You can let them use the emergency method and make their own, or you could have some prepared. If you're preparing to split, you know that's what you're going to do. You could anticipate that a little in advance and get some bees, make up a little nuke, get them started with some queen cells before you make your splits. If you had a really strong colony, typically, so I didn't finish answering the question you asked me just a minute ago. So you could have some queen cells in one of your splits. Let's say let's say they were swarming. Let's say you're too late and you've got swarm cells in there. You got 15 swarm cells. Well, before they fly away, let's nuke them. You could take 2 boxes clear full of bees and make 4 nukes out of them, and divide those queen cells up into each one of your new colonies. So that queen would emerge from those cells and go on a mating flight, and there's your queen right there. You didn't have to purchase one or worry about it elsewhere. So there's lots of different ways of doing that. So since you, thanks for asking that question. So we're going to be selling queen bees. Let me put in a little plug here while we're on that subject. So I brought a frame with me with the push-in cage. So we worked out most of the kinks last year of raising our own queen bees and then getting them to a customer. So we're going to have some queen bees for sale this year, and we've got a couple of different ways that you could get a queen cell. So before I explain a little bit more about the ways that we've got that, let me just say, so usually a typical a B class, you just push the play button on me and we'll go for at least 2 hours before we even take a break. It usually spills over into 3 hours at least. So you tell me when I'm shutting down. We can just keep talking, and if you need to leave, go ahead and leave.
Well, we like to leave time for people to talk to each other during the thing. So let's go 5 more minutes if that's okay.
Okay.
And then.
All right. So before I follow up on that, Has anybody got some urgent queen, any questions about queens or anything else that's urgent that we don't want to send you home without having your question answered that you were just burning to ask? Yeah.
So do most people use the color coding for what year the queens were?
Yeah, if you've gone to the trouble to learn how to mark your queens, yes. So there's an international color code. This year's red, am I right?
Yeah.
Red this year. And most people don't mark their queens though. So it's a little bit of a trick. It's once you get the hang of it, it's not that big a deal, but it's risky to mark queen bees. So a lot of people don't. But if you are going to mark your queens, yeah, typically people will follow that color code. So, yep. So it's usually it's a good idea to follow it too. So I mean that colony that I have, that queen that I told you about that was 4 years old, no way I would have known that unless I'd clipped her wing or clipped a certain wing in a certain way that I would remember what year it was, or if I put a color on her that I would remember. So that's a good idea to paint your queen bees. Practice on your drones before
Yeah,
you
you don't damage it.
They can't sting yet.
What are you laughing at?
The poor
They can't
drones,
sting.
the bad.
So those pens, those marking pens, you know, when you first put them on there, if you haven't used it for a minute, sometimes they gush out of there. You know why that would be a bad thing, right? Right. So if you've got a little paintbrush or something, make sure you dab it on somewhere else first till you know just how much paint's going to come off of there before you put it on the queen. If you're not sure, pick up a drone. You practice on the drones because they don't have stingers. Yeah. Then you try queen. So my favorite way, yeah, I can pick them up and mark them, no problem. But I really like the little marking tubes. It's got the little plunger with the foam on it, so it's nice and soft. And you do that. I like that not only to mark the queen, but I want to use a really good quality paint to mark the queen with. And if it's a really good enamel, hobby, oil-based paint that's really going to dry hard, it's going to take a while to dry. You don't want to just put her back in. All the bees, all her attendants climb all over her and smear paint all over her antennas and her eyes and wherever else. So stop laughing. So you can put her in that tube, right? And you can set the tube down for 10 minutes in the shade. Put her in the shade. You know how I know that? Put her in the shade. So, yeah.
You killed a few wings that way then.
So will bees come around and attend her if you put her?
They will. They'll find her. Yep. Eventually, they'll find her. I try to put her somewhere for a few. She's okay for a few minutes. You don't need to worry about that. They'll find her anyway. Let that dry. So let's see. Yes.
Hey, I'm Josh. It's my son Preston. We're
Hi.
completely new to this.
Great.
You know, we're developing our backyard still, and I know bees go all over, right, to pollinate.
Yeah.
What are some good plants still to put in our yard that would really help, like shrubs,
Yeah.
sage, lavender? Should we focus on that?
Yes. So if you're just getting started, you're young enough, and you're going to stay in the same place for a while. Plant trees, big trees that bees like. Lindens, plant linden. That's your first tree. If you've got space in your yard for some really big trees, do that. So the trees that you should plant would be most beneficial would be big trees that are going to bloom later rather than first. So we mentioned some trees in the beginning that they get a lot of pollen out of. So your willows and your elms and anyway. So those are good for pollen early on, but those big trees that put out a lot of blossoms and a lot of nectar later in the season would be the best. So lindens, let's see, I think there's locust comes on a little later. Give me some more trees. Shoot out some trees at me. What? Catalpa, horse chestnut, those are later blooming. And so a catalpa is a beautiful tree. So, and a horse chestnut tree, absolutely beautiful for a landscaping, and they're good for the bees too. So if you've got the space and you've got the time for that to grow up, you know, you're looking at a long time for that to mature before it's really going to make a difference to the bees. But do that first. Then go to your shrubs. Those are next. We got a lot of smaller shrubs that'll come on every year. And
What are some of the good natives that you like for that?
Blackberries.
Black, black. So keep
But
going.
what about a cutting garden? Everyone should have some flowers,
Yeah.
right?
Right, so the flowers, the nectar, the amount of nectar that they're gonna get from small
Yeah, but
flowers.
the thing is, you'll get all kinds of pollinators,
Yeah.
like it'll be better for your garden, et cetera,
Yes.
et cetera.
Yes, they won't put out as much nectar, but if everybody will do that, every little bit helps, so.
Sage.
Sage is a good one, lavender's a good one.
I like mint. Sunflowers, big sunflowers.
Sunflowers bees will be all over that one. That one grows quick and fast. That's a good one for bees that come on later. We need things that'll benefit the bees in the fall. So sunflowers is a really good one. That
Just the
sage,
big ones or even a little one?
any of them, yeah. So the big ones, bigger the better, I guess. Whatever you've got.
They just,
Asper's good.
If you go out to
Yeah,
the
asters are
USU
fall.
Extension Service, they have plant pollinator gardens.
Yes.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
4 different times of the year of
Yeah.
plants.
Doesn't Thanksgiving Point have a pollinator garden out there? So go there and get your list, find some, that's the best way to do it, find out what's growing well here. Go to a place like that, some botanical gardens they've got. Utah State has one, it was in Kaysville, I don't know where it is. Yeah, I think it's still in Kaysville. And they've got a label right on the plant. You look at that plant and you say, man, that thing's covered with bees and it's pretty, I want that in my yard, and they go plant that one. So, all right.
Stan, thank you.
Okay.
Everybody, thank you. I don't know how far that list got, did it get all the way around? If anybody still wanted to sign up for Farm Field Days,
I got a text back from Al, he'd sell the mini frames to us. We order a minimum of 250 for $1 a piece, and that includes the shipping.
okay.
So I need to know, because I need to.
So anybody who wants mini frames, come see me. The minimum of 56, so see if we can get 250 of them, and then we can get them ordered. Somebody else had a question back there, Jen.
Yeah, no farm field days.
Do you guys didn't get Farm Field
No,
Days?
we were hoping. And then our bad kids here, so if we can do that.
Oh, our Bab Kids. Come up and introduce the Bab Kids back up.
But they're good kids.
They're good kids.
Here comes the farm paper for those.
Here comes the farm paperback.
Yeah, so like I said, this is one of our bad kids, and this is Preston. And so you'll see him, and if you have, I know, congratulations, right?
It's exciting.
Ammon, right? Okay, Ammon, I'm sorry. So I thought you looked familiar when I was looking back there. Anyway, so these are 2, Ammon and Preston, and then next month we'll have Ashley and Miles come too, so.
And we'll get to hear from them throughout the year as they tell us their adventures. So
Okay,
be
I was gonna give them
prepared.
5 minutes to tell, like,
Oh.
about their name and then just about them a little bit.
You should go first.
Go ahead.
All right. I'm Ammon Bishop, and I'm mainly interested in bees because my dad has done beekeeping. He's done top bar and a little bit of Langstroth, and it's just nice to have homemade honey. I like to put it on my toast. I make honey lemon tea and a bunch of other things like oatmeal, and so it's nice to have it for that. I think beekeeping is interesting. It's cool to like look for the queen and all that type of stuff. See them flying around my yard, and of course it pollinates the plants. So someone has to be a beekeeper to pollinate the plants around the neighborhood. And so yeah, that's why I'm interested.
Where are you from?
I'm from Pleasant Grove, Utah, and I just like outdoor stuff in general. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, I'm Preston Tier. I've always been interested in animals. I got into raising sheep a little bit ago. We haven't done it yet this year, and I thought bees would be kind of cool. I've gotten a little into gardening as well, and I don't know. I love working with animals. We have 18 pets at home.
Wow.
And where are you from?
Mapleton.
He likes eating my honey.
Good job, guys.
Again, if you haven't, you can do your sign up to become a member for $20. Also sign up for the beekeeping class on the 4th. And if you probably have any questions for Stan, he'll be here for a little bit, can answer some other questions. But thank you for coming. Remember, our meetings are always the second Thursday of the month, so just plan that out. ahead of time. So we'll have some great meetings planned through the rest of the year. Thank you, everybody, for coming.